It's amazing to see. And I can't say more about it because I'm trying not to say things that trigger me to start weeping. I have some rescue remedy here for backup.
I'm here.
Yes, thank you. And I have my big sister, which, yeah, I have to be on my best behavior. So I am going to read this to you because I did not sit in front of the mirror practicing it and memorizing it. But I just wanted to say a few words of what I could think of at the last minute, though I could think of a book full of things, but just to keep it short, I will read what I wrote. If a man were defined by his friends, the friendships he has fallen into or forged and then seamlessly maintained, it has become abundantly clear over these past several years actually, that Ian was a master. Ian loved music. This unremarkable detail may in fact be responsible for our finding and keeping each other. I may not have given him a second glance if he hadn't mentioned his love of Nancy Griffith. He was far too quiet, humble, and reserved to show himself to me in words or gestures, but his taste in music spoke volumes. Ian's patience was infinite. And that is a very good thing because I was an hour late for our first date. Having first to extricate myself from the date I already had with another guy that Ian had no clue about. I found him sitting alone in a Chinese restaurant in an Austrian ski resort looking extremely uncomfortable and as if he were just coming to terms with the fact that he was being stood up. Little did I know at the time that I had come this close to missing the once-in-a-lifetime chance to find the love of my life. I'm breathing too heavy into the microphone.
Yes.
And the reason I agreed to meet him that night, despite the fact I had another date, was the sound of his voice on the phone when he called to invite me. It was the simple fact that he had asked in his softest, most unassuming voice if I fancied going out for dinner. And I had to fight the urge to say, if you keep saying fancy, I think I'd fancy doing just about anything with you. Ian loved wood. He spent the majority of his time working with wood, whether chopping down trees and splitting them up into perfect fireplace-sized logs for the finished masonry stove he built with his own hands, or building and finishing houses for other people while ours remained without doors and closets or cupboards. Even after his eyesight began to succumb to this disease, he noticed and reached out to run his hands along the rough, centuries-old wooden beams in this, his sister's beautiful house. Ian loved his children. He was the patient parent who actually sat down to draw with his children and quietly impart his artistic wisdom to their eager minds. And when Isla had her first ballet recital, it was Ian who spent a half hour watching how-to videos on YouTube, then wowing the other ballet moms with his backstage prowess for ballet buns. And long after his face could barely smile or register emotion, just the sight of his daughters' faces or the sound of their voices put a curl into his lips and light into his tired eyes. Ian was funny until the end. As his eyes succumbed to the disease in his brain, it was often hard for him to focus and make direct eye contact. One day, as I was helping him into his bedclothes, I asked him if he could still see me clearly. "Can you look into my eyes?" I said. "Can you see me clearly?" "I can see your wrinkles," he said. And then he laughed with his new deep laugh. Ian liked to know how things worked. He was the first and only person to tell me that if you listened closely, you could hear the wings of birds not only just flapping, but squeaking as they flew overhead. He didn't just watch the birds fly, he listened for the mechanics of their bones and the sound of the air moving through their feathers. Ian didn't waste anything. I lived in fear of throwing things out in our house, even the smallest of screws or a random piece of string. He might have had some grand plan for it that only he could conjure, and I would be scolded for having made it disappear. Out of breath. When he undressed each night for bed, dozens of coins, screws, and nails would fall out of the pockets of his dusty, filthy Carhartt work pants and roll across the wide pine wooden floors that he built. Amidst the manly debris, there was often a hair tie or a sparkly barrette, which he had on hand for last-minute hairdos. For his daughters, not. Oh dear. Ian had good hands, both aesthetically and metaphorically and literally. Whether he was working with wood, making fairy cakes for a birthday, sewing a last-minute Halloween costume on a child's toy sewing machine, or consoling his children, his hands never failed us. On that very first night, the one where I showed up late for dinner, I was pleasantly surprised at how confidently this unassuming man's hand first ever enveloped my own. Ian was graceful. He used to ski with his hands behind his back like a perfect British gentleman. He did. He never had poles because he was always carrying things for Valentine's Scotch promotions. He had them clasped casually, unassuming, leaning forward, carving humble, perfect turns all the way down the mountain. Even in debilitating and indignant sickness, he never once raged against the world or the people around him who cared for him so much. Ian loved his friends. And even after being bedridden and unable to speak, he never once turned down a visit from one of his many amazing friends. You know who you are, all of you, and continued to show up again and again despite the disturbing nature of his disease and what it was doing to him. On the contrary, he often sounded eager and happy to see them. That is the end of my quick scribbles, but I had a couple poem-type things to read. One of which, I wrote down myself for Ian when I noticed that when I was sure that he was struggling to know how to let go. He was caught in between knowing who to be loyal to, his self, to get out of his suffering, or us. And some of you skier friends might appreciate the theme of it. Push off. Over the cornice, down the couloir, gravity guides you. Do not resist. Do not apply pressure. The snow is so light and soft. Just lean in and float. No fighting, no resistance. Yield. Immerse yourself. Surrender to the mountain, to the fall line, to the sweeping descent. Take a breath. Hold it. Take another. Hold it. Acknowledge your fear and ski right past. The powder is endless. Keep skiing. Never stop. And I'll let you eat now. Thank you.
Now you can relax and have a drink. We are going to do a table by table buffet style lunch. So this table will come up and then we'll work our way around and take your food, sit down, have drinks and enjoy.